Hi, I'm Jonathan Weinberg, and this is Drawing with Fountain Pens. Today I am looking at a pen that I had learned about through Doodlebud, who I very much like. He went on and on about the Parker 25, which is a pen that was developed in England in the 1970s. And he spoke so highly of it, and that it's so relatively inexpensive to still get because it was so popular, that I went out and got one, and I did immediately enjoy it. And then I found out that actually it is a pen that we know the designer, really famous designer, Kenneth Grange, who only just died last year. So it really seems to me to make sense to talk about it, given my fascination with fountain pen design and with modernist design. So I'm going to talk about that. They no longer make this pen, but as it turns out, this is another one of the pens that Moonman has made almost, I would say, almost an exact clone of, that you can still buy very inexpensively. Of course, the price probably going up now because of the tariff. So here's the pen, the Parker 25. It was designed by Kenneth Grange. Now, Kenneth Grange is really a key figure in the history of modernist design. He's probably best known for designing the Kodak Instamatic, and as well as in England, a lot of products, the company Kenwood, a lot of kitchen products. He also designed a famous train in the late 60s into the 70s, and all kinds of industrial designs. He was someone who very much believed in the idea of pleasure and functionality. He was born in 1929. He really comes to the fore as a designer, apprentices or works with architects, and then he opens his own design firm in the late 50s, and he did some work with Kodak and kind of complained that their cameras weren't that interesting. And that was a time when really Kodak was making all of its money on the film and in developing and all the chemicals, and they weren't thinking so much about making money selling their cameras. The cameras were kind of the way that they got you into their whole, the whole system of taking photographs and developing photographs and the film. I mean, that was just a huge, huge business. But they began to say, well, let's make money selling cameras. And the Instamatic, which is huge success, was designed by and with the idea of not just making a camera that people would buy, but one that was really looked good and was affordable. And so that was one of his key designs that he came up with. I love one of the things that he's well known for towards the much later in his life. I think he was his mother had died, and he was horrified by the choices of coffins. And it was at that time that he designed his own coffin, which when you came to his house, you would see he used it as a bookcase. And I don't know, I hope that he was buried in it, because that was the idea. But what a wonderful and clever idea to make a coffin, and even to think about designing a coffin in a way that seems to seem so much more human, using the shape of the human body. He also was quite critical of a lot of the sort of iconic designs of the Bauhaus, for example. Last time I was talking about form following function, how problematic that sometimes is. He wasn't just critical of Apple, but he was critical of the kinds of things like the Mies chair, or the kind of particularly Bauhaus furniture, which he said was very uncomfortable, usually looks great, but doesn't necessarily feel great. And he mentioned how you often have to sit very low, and it's hard to get out of some of the furniture that is designed by architects. I think he has in mind particularly Mies van der Rohe's famous Barcelona chair, which is pretty low and is a little bit hard to get in and out of, although I think it's reasonably comfortable. He also kind of criticized one of the famous Eames chairs because you have to really put a cushion on it if you're going to sit on it for a long time. Again, I personally don't think that's so fair, but I think in his larger sense that what was important to him was the pleasure, he said, that people get out of his products. That's what he's focusing on. And also economy, that a good design should give you pleasure, but it also should be affordable to make. Late in life, he was quite critical of Apple because he felt that Apple products were over-designed, and he complained that he had an Apple Mini, but that every time he went to turn it on, he forgot where the button was. So for him, it was very important that a design be absolutely functional and obvious what you're supposed to do. And that, I mean, obviously a pen is much simpler than a computer, but there is a kind of elegant simplicity. Anyway, in the early 70s, Parker was trying to appeal to younger people, and they decided to go outside of the normal designers and get him to work on this. He's also a designer who believed very strongly in making things economical. And so everything about this pen, as Doodlebud says, is about making something that's well crafted, beautifully designed, but also quite inexpensive to make and very well thought out. Now, I very much one thing I like about the pen is the nib. And I very much like the fact this is similar to Schaefer's Triumph nib. So it's a wraparound nib. I think that's really quite beautiful. It is this brush chrome, stainless steel outside, but the section is plastic, and that actually works really well so that the section is not as slippery as the rest of the pen. So I actually like that when a pen has that. Often, like Lami's, for example, when it does, in its studio line, does a pen that's all metal, I often find that's way too slippery. Now, when you got the pen originally, it was a pen, I think, that was meant to be primarily a cartridge pen, but it did come with a converter, and in those days, it would have been an aromatic converter. I have put in actually a converter that was meant for a Lamy pen, which actually will work in this pen. It also will take, I believe, Lamy cartridges as well as Parker cartridges. So that's something to note. The other thing to be said about it is it has this kind of movement. It goes sort of the opposite the way a lot of pens go. Instead of the metal coming down to meet the section here, it has this very dramatic movement here at the end of the pen. What's nice about that is that it posts very, very securely. And it really is a pen that is meant to be posted because it's quite light, and when it's posted, it really feels weighted nicely. Now, something that he did to make it different, not just the way in which the shape of the pen is different, but instead of using the traditional Parker arrow as a clip, it has this very nice clip, but it's much more like a paper clip, and it just has the insignia, the logo of Parker. And that's a big difference because obviously they wanted to make a pen that made a statement that looked different from their other pens. And I think it's quite successful at doing that. It's understated, and yet it's elegant and it's modern. And right now it looks very of the times now, I think, because the whole look of it is something like the way in which, well, people are so obsessed with stainless steel and kitchens and stainless steel appliances, so it goes very much with a kind of style today, I think, as well. I forgot to mention the finial here is just a sort of inserted piece of black plastic. The other side, it's stainless steel. And it clicks, very satisfying click to it. Now, the one thing I would say about this pen, which cost me under $40 on eBay, is that the nib seemed to me to be somewhat, it tends to dry out, and I think that it wasn't taken care of as well as it should be. So I'm not so sure if this is the best pen to test the way it writes. I take other people at their word who say, that this is a pen that writes very nicely. Now, how does the clone look in comparison? And this is, Moonman has come out with a clone that is just remarkably similar. It is almost identical, but it's honest. It says Moonman on it. It doesn't have the Parker logo, but it's quite similar. I'd say it feels a tiny bit lighter than the original. It doesn't seem quite as expensive somehow in the finish of the pen, the way the brush stainless is on the original seems nicer to me, but it is remarkably close. It's exactly the same size. Inside, this is more a kind of doodle-bud thing, but in order to sort of bring the pen together, right, the threads, you have metal meeting plastic, and as Doodlebud said, there's nothing wrong with that as long as you do brass inside. The brass works much better with the plastic than stainless steel or aluminum, and this does do the same thing. It does have a brass. It seems to have brass inside, and that's the same thing as in the original. It also writes very much like a Chinese pen. In this case, where my version of the 25 has a tendency to run out, to be wet in the beginning and then dry out. That doesn't happen with the Chinese pen. It is very reliable. Most Chinese pens that I get always seem to write reasonably well. It's a bit scratchy. That's what I would say in terms of the nib. This beautiful looking nib, the wraparound nib, is not a nib that has any flex to it at all. So it looks good. It writes reliably in the case of the Moonman, but it doesn't have any great merits to it other than that. This is very affordable, or was. I don't know what the price is going to be with the tariffs, but it was under $20. This is the Moonman B25, and this, of course, is the Parker 25, which you can get, and in this case, you can still get used ones somewhere in the range of $40, $50 if you're looking on eBay. I think actually the Doodlebud and his praise for this pen probably has raised the price, and maybe I have as well. So now I'm going to do a writing sample, and then I have some beautiful hyacinths. It's spring that I did a drawing of. So how does this thing write? So this is the Parker 25, and it is, I think it's supposed to be a medium. And as I say, the nib I think has happened to it, and I had to sort of work on it, and I got it to be quite wet. I'm using diamine oxblood in it, which is a really nice ink. And this is, of course, rodeo paper. And right now it's writing very smoothly. It doesn't really have that's no line variation at all. And this is actually quite nice. The problem is I know that it's very, very wet right now. And I know if I keep working with this, maybe I write maybe a page or two, it's going to run out of ink. I mean, it's not going to literally run out of ink, but the feed won't keep up and it'll go dry. That's been sort of my experience with it. So maybe a nib smith could fix that. But I can tell that it's, right now it's writing very smooth. I very much like wet pens, so that's not so bad. And it did a great job. It's actually reverse writing also, so it's doing nicely now. But I had to work on it a lot, and that happens. When you get a used pen, you don't know what has been happening with it. So I don't know how representative it is. So that's it. And then, let's see. And here's the Moonman. Let's move it down. B25. And this is what they call, I think it's fine. I think it might come in 2 sizes. I think it's like, they call it a 5-point millimeter. I'm not sure what the designation is, but it's definitely like a Asian fine. I wouldn't call this a medium. And again, it's diamine oxblood. And it's a little scratchy. It's not bad, you know, it's just not great. It's not a kind of, I can't really recommend this pen in terms of its nib. And the problem here is that because of the kind of nib it is, this wraparound nib, you can't really replace it. So with a lot of Chinese pens, if they're using size 6 nibs, or even 5 nibs, you can find a Jovo nib, or you can replace the nib and improve the pen. But you can't do that with this because it's a custom type nib. I mean, I suppose you might be able to, you might be able to swap it with an original Parker 25, but why would you do that? And I'm not sure, someone else might know this, but I couldn't take this nib out. In both cases, I couldn't find a way to get the nib out. I'm sure one could take the pen apart somehow and get the nib out, but it's not meant to come out, I think. So, it's not, I don't think it's meant to be replaced. So that's another thing. But it's fine.